Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day. So,
I stand with the protesters. And I think all well-meaning Americans stand with the protesters. It's not an isolated incident. It is a continuum of cases and situations that have been going on for decades and decades and decades. These are just chapters in a book. And the title of the book is Continuing Injustice and Inequality in America. And these are just chapters. The chapters started modern day Rodney King in Los Angeles, 1991. Abner Louima in New York, 1997. Amadou Diallo in New York, 1999. Sean Bell in New York, 2006. Oscar Grant, Oakland, California, 2009. Eric Garner, New York City, 2014. Michael Brown, Missouri, 2014. Laquan McDonald, Chicago, 2014. Freddie Gray, Baltimore, 2015. Antoine Rose, Pittsburgh, 2018. Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia, 2020. Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, 2020. George Floyd in Minneapolis, 2020. That's why the outrage. That's why the frustration and the anger. It is not about one situation. It's about the same situation happening again and again and again and again, and seeing the same thing and not learning the lesson. And then it's that happening in a broader context and a broader circumstances, which is what's going on with the coronavirus, which affects and kills more minorities than anyone else. You look around this country and you look at the people who are dying of the coronavirus, it is disproportionate African American people. And it's just a continuing injustice, and that's the frustration and that's the protests. Nobody is sanctioning the arson and the burglaries, but the protesters and the anger and the fear and the frustration, yes, yes. And the demand is for justice. And when the prosecutor came out and said, well, there's other evidence, but I can't tell you anything more than that, that only incited the frustration. Injustice in the justice system. How repugnant to the concept of America. And over and over and over again. I stand against the arson and the burglary and the criminality. I stand with the protesters. And I think all well-meaning Americans stand with the protesters. Enough is enough. How many times do you have to see the same lesson replayed before you do something? This country is better than this. It has been better than this. And it shouldn't take this long to end basic discrimination.
We cannot simply turn away and dismiss those in peaceful protest as troublemakers or paranoid. Whether you are black or white or Hispanic or Asian or Native American or of Middle Eastern descent, we have all seen this bigotry in our own lives at some point. We've heard it at times in our own homes. If we're honest, perhaps we've heard prejudice in our own heads and felt it in our own hearts. We know that. And while some suffer far more under racism's burden, some feel to a far greater extent discrimination's sting. Although most of us do our best to guard against it and teach our children better, none of us is entirely innocent. No institution is entirely immune. And that includes our police departments. We know this. And so when African Americans from all walks of life, from different communities across the country, voice a growing despair over what they perceive to be unequal treatment, when study after study shows that whites and people of color experience the criminal justice system differently, so that if you're black, you're more likely to be pulled over or searched or arrested, more likely to get longer sentences, more likely to get the death penalty for the same crime. When mothers and fathers raise their kids right and have the talk about how to respond if stopped by a police officer, yes sir, no sir, but still fear that something terrible may happen when their child walks out the door, still fear that kids being stupid and not quite doing things right might end in tragedy. When all this takes place more than 50 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act, we cannot simply turn away and dismiss those in peaceful protest as troublemakers or paranoid